Hey everybody, I wanted to do a quick video for you talking about a particular hoof problem and how to recognize it and what it is, and hopefully how to deal with it a little bit. And to do that, I'm going to make myself quite a little here, and we're going to take a look at the picture itself. Now this hoof has problems, obviously, but what I really want to concentrate on is this crease right here. This crease that goes all the way around the hoof. And there's a few other ones, but this is the most prominent one. And I want to be able to, and you can see the other one, the hoof behind it also has the same problem. And this is very common to see that all four hooves have the same problem. And it generally will come from a change in environment or diet. Possibly, but mostly this comes from a lack of historically good trimming. You could say that this horse has probably been left long, or I don't know the history, but most of the time I see problems like this that have come from horses that were shod. I would imagine this hoof came out of shoes a couple of months ago, and now somebody's come along and tried to make a difference for it. I don't have the history, so I can't say, but this is a very, very common thing where the shoe has come off, there's a different trimming style being applied, and now we have this big crease here. So what's the crease? What is it? It's actually a good thing in the end. It's a sign of good times coming, for the most part, but bad times that are long past, hopefully long past. So to demonstrate this or to illustrate this, we're going to wander over to 3D. And I've been working on a different video for a little bit, talking about the different kinds of hooves that we have. We have sort of a more normal one over here, and then this is going to be a half hoof. I'll show you in a second. And then we've got these two hooves over here, which are the bad hooves. And if you have seen my other video on this topic, we talk about the heels and why having one hoof that looks like the heels are more parallel than perpendicular to the ground is quite bad. So if we pop around to the other side and zoom out a little, we can see where the bones sit. I've been modeling out some bones, and so we've got the coffin bone or the pedal bone, we've got the navicular bone, and then the P2. And these bones, this is where they pretty much sit inside of a healthy hoof, roundabouts. It's quite close. And this is where they'll sit in a more unhealthy hoof. You can see they sit a little lower. Some people call these sinkers. But bottom line is that the hoof is either migrating upwards or the bones are migrating downwards. It's irrelevant how you look at it. There's a problem, and there's a reason for this problem. So let's take a look at the file that I'm going to use to explain this problem. And what it is, it's pretty much the same thing. We still got the three bones in the hoof. But I wanted to take a look at what the structure of a hoof looks like. We think about those tubules, we think about the angles and stuff. I'm just going to wander into, let's go into edit mode, essentially. And what we can see here is all these lines going downwards. Going down, these are all parallel lines. I mean, it's a 3D program, so it's geometrically, this is going to be pretty darn good, or it should be. But this is essentially what a hoof should look like. And if we take a look back at our picture, we can see the same lines, but these ones are quite wavy. And then up here, we can see there's this big crease that has happened. But these lines do exist in a hoof. They are there. There's some to that. Except for here, this big crease has happened. So what's the crease? We want to know that. And let's go back to Blender. A 3D program. If you've never used it, you should. It's free. So easy to get into, to play around with it a little bit. But this has helped me visualize a lot of these problems. So what we have here is, we can imagine these are the paths of the tubules. There's not very many lines, but it's good enough for our purposes here. And when these lines go straight down to the ground, they are strongest. No different than if we use a straw, or if we use, like in my examples, I used a toilet. paper roll, empty roll thing, or a can or anything, when these are straight and the force is being applied from the bottom side to the top side upwards in a straight line, the force of the horse stepping, they're strongest. But when they are going more parallel with the ground, like in this case, this red hoof here, we can see it's collapsing downwards. It's quite parallel to the ground. And that's completely undesirable. We don't want that. That'll continue to collapse as the hoof comes down onto the ground. So that leads us to, well, how does this crease happen? So because we can kind of see the geometric or the geometry of a hoof in plane form here, we can also try to imagine what it might look like if we model it. So here I've modeled one, and I'm going to select this one here, and we're going to tab, and I've added in some extra points here. And if we look at what's happening here, we can see our lines at the back are kind of curving in and under, and they're sort of smashing up against the next ones ahead. But these ones do. All these ones here, all these points here end up pushing forward because of it. So we'll push those forward a little bit because the tubules do want to run parallel. Otherwise, they crunch into each other, and it further makes for a poor structure. And in some cases, when the heel is trying to go backwards and toes are going forwards or something like that due to mechanical pressures, meaning just like the forces of the horses are hitting the ground, they'll crack. And so say, for example, if we took these ones and we went backwards with it, well, sooner or later, I mean, this is an extreme, but sooner or later, something has to give. Anyhow, so if we look at what happens with this hoof, and when we add in these lines and we add in this little crease, we'll come out of here, you can see I put in a little crease. But what's really, really important to note, and that's why I started with, this is the sign of hopefully good times, is that the top part is no different than what it was before. So if I put the other hoof back in, you can see I'm just going to blink in and out of the bad hoof. You can see the top is relatively the same up until the crease. Okay, and then to make this even more obvious, I'm going to put it in an X-ray mode. Let's see, that's not sure which one's going to be best, but maybe we could do this. And the white one is the good one, the black one's the bad one. If we quickly go to X-ray mode here, we can kind of see that where the good hoof is far behind where the bad one is, or the deformed one. And that happens at that crease. So when that crease goes down all the way to the ground, theoretically, if everything is maintained, and this would be done as this trim has kind of been going, where the toe is kind of, you know, it's given a good solid bevel, because what happens is, the reason we have this crease here is because of mechanical leverage. So let's come back into here. Let's take off X-ray mode for a second. And what happens is, with the bad hoof, when it's been growing for so long and the heels start to kind of climb under, the whole hoof, actually, let's move over to this one so you can see what happens inside of the hoof. So if these three will end up sort of migrating down. So we will just bring these down a little bit. And then this whole piece here will start to rotate like this. And we'll bring it forward a little bit. And we can bring these guys up a little bit like that. And you can see how that heel is starting to form up the way that it does in real life. We'll just sort of mess around a little bit here. I'll just kind of, and it's kind of actually, let's just remove that for a second. Okay, now bring this up And you can see how the heel is starting to get a little bit more parallel to the ground because it has to come upwards. And then this will come down like that. It's kind of an unclean way of doing this. I could definitely do this a little bit better, but I think you'll get the idea of what we end up looking at. And all of this sort of goes forwards like that. And this will start to go forward like that. Okay, and then we start to see that the gap between the bones and the hoof wall itself starts to get wider and wider. And the material that has to fill in here is a really weak keratin. And that's what's sort of living. If we look at this x-ray sort of view, if we can look at the bad hoof, the good hoof. So the good hoof is sitting inside here. This is where the actual wall should be going down. And so the gap between this hoof wall and where the actual hoof wall is, it's all filled in right up from that crease. But before the crease actually happened way up top. So that's why I said for the last couple of months, probably, this has been properly trimmed. And we can see that because there's a crease. And plenty of hooves out there are like this. There is no crease, and yet it looks like this hoof wall here without the crease. So it'll look like this one a little bit more. Come around to the other side, and it'll have these low heels. Actually, let's look at the other file. This one here. It'll look like this one here, where there is no crease. The walls look straight, but everything is kind of sloping forward. So. And the heels are crushing under. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a visual reference as to what these creases are, how they get there, and what they can indicate. So if you have any questions, let me know anytime, and I'll see you guys in the next one.